The day I discovered my daughter's file on my desk, I'd missed 9 years of her life.
The school tried to expel my daughter. Then her genius IQ revealed the billionaire who abandoned us. The day my daughter was almost expelled for being too smart to be real, I walked into that school with a $20 blazer, a stuffed folder, and no idea a billionaire was about to be dragged out of my past. Thank you for helping Mr. Steele Rich Stories past 2,500 subscribers. Whether you've been with us from the beginning or just discovered our channel, your support means everything. Please share this video right now with anyone who's ever had a misunderstood child or felt judged by a system that fears what it doesn't understand. Have you ever watched adults label a child a problem just because they couldn't control her, or felt the world was punishing your kid for thinking differently? This is about a school system that confuses genius with defiance and treats questioning as disrespect, and how one mother's fight to save her daughter's future exposed a billionaire father who didn't even know he had a child. By the end of this story, you'll see how forgiveness and second chances can reshape everything you thought you knew about family. I sat in Principal Isabel Herrera's office on a plastic chair that squeaked every time I shifted my weight. The walls displayed motivational posters about reaching for the stars and believing in yourself. Ironic, considering we were here because my 9-year-old daughter had done exactly that. Naomi sat beside me, her legs dangling above the floor, hands folded in her lap with that perfect stillness she adopted when adults disappointed her. Her dark hair fell straight past her shoulders, and behind her glasses, those grey-green eyes, her father's eyes, though he'd never know it, watched everything with calculation. Across the conference table, 3 adults arranged themselves like a tribunal. Principal Herrera centered herself behind a manila folder thick as a phone book with Naomi Brooks' disciplinary file written across the tab in aggressive red ink. To her left, Megan Rowan, Naomi's homeroom teacher, twisted her wedding ring and avoided eye contact. To her right, Rakesh Patel, the school counselor, clicked his pen repeatedly while reviewing his notes. "Mrs. Brooks," Principal Herrera began, her voice carrying that practiced calm administrators use before dropping bombs, "thank you for coming on such short notice. We need to discuss some serious concerns about Naomi's behavior." "Miss Brooks," I corrected automatically, "and I'm aware you have concerns. What I'm not aware of is why this required pulling my daughter from class like she'd committed a crime." The principal opened the folder, revealing page after page of incident reports, screenshots, and what looked like programming code printed on school letterhead. "This is a disciplinary hearing, Miss Brooks. The severity of Naomi's actions may warrant immediate expulsion." The word hung in the air like a threat. Expulsion. For a 9-year-old. "Perhaps we should review the specific incidents," Mr. Patel suggested, still clicking that pen. Click, 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 like a countdown. Principal Herrera pulled out a typed list. "Over the past 3 months, Naomi has repeatedly violated school policies. She gained unauthorized access to our scheduling system and altered the bell schedule." "I optimized it," Naomi said, her voice flat and matter-of-fact. "You were losing 3 minutes between every transition due to inefficient routing patterns. I maintained the same instructional hours while reducing hallway congestion by 37%. Mrs. Rowan flinched. She hacked into a secure system. "The password was Madison," Naomi replied. "That's not secure. That's negligent." I placed a warning hand on my daughter's knee, though part of me wanted to high-five her. Principal Herrera continued reading. "She's repeatedly challenged test questions during examinations, disrupting other students. The questions contained factual errors," Naomi said. Question 12 on last week's science test stated that humans have 206 bones. That's only accurate for adults. Children have approximately 270 bones that fuse during development. The question didn't specify age parameters. "She refuses to show her work in mathematics," Mrs. Rowan added, finally finding her voice. She writes computer code instead of proper mathematical steps. Code is more efficient, Naomi responded. Why write 30 steps when an algorithm demonstrates the logic in 5 lines? The adults exchanged those looks, the ones I'd seen 100 times before. The looks that said my daughter scared them. Not because she was violent or cruel, but because she thought in ways they couldn't follow, solved problems they hadn't seen, asked questions they couldn't answer. The most serious issue, Principal Herrera said, pulling out another document, is the state examination. My stomach dropped. Naomi had taken the standardized test 2 weeks ago. Naomi scored perfectly, 100%. No student in this district has ever achieved that score. The principal's tone suggested this was evidence of wrongdoing rather than excellence. The testing board flagged it for review. They found irregularities. What kind of irregularities? I kept my voice steady, though my hands clenched in my lap. She marked 3 questions as having no correct answer provided and wrote extensive explanations in the margins about why the test itself was flawed. The board believes she had access to the test beforehand. They're investigating academic fraud. That's absurd, I said. Naomi's never cheated in her life. She corrects errors on restaurant menus for fun. She sends emails to textbook publishers about typos. She once made me return to a grocery store because they'd given us 12 cents too much change. Nevertheless, Principal Herrera said, combined with her pattern of disruptive behavior, system breaches, and inability to follow standard procedures, we believe Naomi poses a threat to our learning environment. A threat. I stood up, the squeaky chair scraping against linoleum. She's 9 years old. Age is irrelevant when considering the safety and integrity of our educational system, the principal replied. You're afraid of her. The words came out sharp, accusatory, true. You're sitting here, 3 adults telling me you want to expel a little girl because she makes you uncomfortable. Because she thinks faster than you, sees problems you miss, fixes things you broke. Mr. Patel stopped clicking his pen. Ms. Brooks, no one is afraid. Then test her, I interrupted. Get a real evaluation, not some basic screening from a school psychologist who's overwhelmed with 300 students. Get an actual cognitive specialist. Run real assessments. If you're going to claim my daughter is too different for your school, then prove it. Scientifically. Such evaluations are expensive, Mrs. Rowan said quietly. The district doesn't typically try to expel 9-year-olds for being smart either, but here we are. Principal Herrera closed the folder with deliberate finality. Very well. We'll suspend Naomi for 1 week while you arrange for an independent cognitive evaluation. If the results indicate she requires specialized education beyond our capabilities, we'll revisit placement options. If not, the expulsion recommendation stands. And if the evaluation shows what I already know, I asked, that she's exactly what she appears to be, a brilliant child who deserves education, not exile. I looked at my daughter, still sitting with that unnatural stillness, processing every word like data points in whatever vast calculation ran constantly behind those grey-green eyes. She was breaking their boxes simply by existing, and they wanted to punish her for it. Come on, Naomi. I gathered my purse, that $20 blazer suddenly feeling like armor made of tissue paper. As we reached the door, Principal Herrera called out, Miss Brooks, I hope you understand this is for everyone's benefit, including Naomi's. I turned back. No, Principal Herrera. This is about control. You can't control her mind, so you want to remove it from your environment. But I'll tell you something. I've fought battles with nothing but determination before. I've stood up to people who feared brilliance, who tried to dim lights they couldn't stare at directly. Last time, I lost more than I thought possible. I paused, hand on the doorknob, remembering another confrontation, another brilliant mind, another set of people who chose fear over understanding. That loss had a name, I said quietly. Cassiel Monroe. And if you think I'm going to lose again, you're severely mistaken. We left them sitting in their confusion, wondering who Cassiel Monroe was and why his name carried weight in my voice like a stone I'd carried for 10 years. Walking to our beat-up Honda Civic, I did quick math in my head. $83 in checking, rent overdue by 6 days, no credit cards left with space. An independent cognitive evaluation could cost thousands. But as I watched Naomi buckle her seatbelt with mechanical precision, I knew I'd find the money. Sell everything I owned if necessary. Because the last time I'd let the world convince me that different meant dangerous, I'd walked away from someone who needed understanding, not abandonment. That someone was Naomi's father, though she didn't know it yet, and that was a secret buried so deep I'd convinced myself it would never surface. I should have known better. Secrets have a way of rising when daughters inherit more than their father's eyes. 10 years before that disciplinary hearing, I was 20 years old and running on 3 hours of sleep and discount coffee. My life consisted of 3 part-time jobs that barely covered rent, night classes at community college where I studied business administration because it seemed practical, and caring for my mother, Marion Brooks, whose kidneys had decided to stage a slow rebellion against her body. My dreams were small enough to fit in the palm of my hand, a job with actual benefits, an apartment where the ceiling didn't leak when it rained, maybe one vacation somewhere that required a passport. I'd never been on a plane, never owned a car that didn't break down monthly, never had anyone tell me I was gifted or special or destined for anything beyond survival. Tuesday and Thursday evenings, I tutored at the Riverside Community Center, a concrete building that smelled like industrial cleaner and hope. $20 per session, cash, teaching basic computer skills to kids whose parents worked, doubles and triples like mine once had. I was good at explaining things, breaking down complex ideas into digestible pieces. But being good at something and being recognized for it were different universes in my world. The center's computers were ancient, donated by companies that probably claimed tax write-offs worth more than the machines themselves. Half the keyboards had missing letters. The monitors flickered like dying fireflies. But those kids showed up anyway, eager to learn, to touch technology that might lift them somewhere better. I understood that hunger. It lived in my bones like marrow. The day everything changed started with me wedged under a folding table, tangled in Ethernet cables, cursing whoever designed computer ports to be invisible from normal human angles. New computers had arrived, actually new, still in boxes, with that fresh electronics smell that meant possibility. You've got that component upside down. The voice came from above, casual and amused. I jerked, banging my head on the table's metal edge hard enough to see stars. Son of a... I bit off the curse, remembering we were in a building full of kids, even if they were in other rooms. A hand appeared in my field of vision, male, calloused in unexpected places, offering assistance. I grabbed it and let myself be pulled from under the table. The man attached to the hand wore faded jeans with honest wear at the knees, a grey t-shirt that had seen better decades, and work boots that actually looked worked in. His dark hair needed a cut, falling into eyes that were grey-green like the ocean before a storm. He held 2 cups of coffee, one of which he offered to me. "Peace offering for startling you," he said, "though technically the component is still upside down." I took the coffee, real coffee, not the instant powder the center provided, and inhaled its steam. "And you're an expert on component orientation." "I dabble." He set his own cup on the table and crouched beside the computer tower. With 3 economical movements, he had the part correctly installed. "Cassiel." "I'm supposed to be helping with the setup, Leighton." I watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements, the way he handled the equipment like he'd done this 1,000 times. "You volunteer here?" "Starting today." He moved to the next box, breaking it open with practiced ease. The center director said they needed someone who knew computers. I know computers. That was like saying Shakespeare knew words. Over the following weeks, Casil became part of my Tuesday-Thursday routine. He'd arrive just as my tutoring sessions ended, always carrying 2 coffees, always in those same worn clothes that made him look like any other volunteer giving back to the community. We developed a rhythm. I'd teach the kids basic programs while he set up hardware, fixed printers, and somehow made our ancient network run faster than it had any right to. During breaks, we'd sit on the center's front steps, sharing stories that felt both intimate and carefully edited. He told me he'd studied economics and computer science and did consulting work that paid the bills. When I asked what kind of consulting, he'd wave his hand vaguely and say, helping companies make better decisions with their resources. It sounded boring enough that I didn't push for details. We talked about the kids, about education, about the way the world seemed designed to keep certain people in certain boxes. He mentioned his mother, Elena, who'd insisted he understand how most people lived, not just the lucky few. He spoke less fondly of his father, Gregory, who apparently believed charity should come with tax benefits and photo opportunities. My father thinks volunteering here is pointless, Casil said one evening as we waited for my bus. He says real change requires real money, not teaching a handful of kids to use spreadsheets. Your father sounds like an ass, I said, then immediately regretted it. Sorry, I didn't mean... No, you're right, he is. Casil's smile was rueful, but he's also not entirely wrong. These kids need more than computer skills. They need opportunity, access, connections. They need someone to give a damn, I countered. And you're here. That matters. He looked at me then with an expression I couldn't decode, something between admiration and sadness. You really believe that, don't you? Do individual actions matter? They're all we have. The bus arrived, wheezing and late as always. Grand gestures are for people with grand resources. The rest of us just show up and do what we can. He rode the bus with me that night, and many nights after, even though I suspected he had a car parked somewhere. We'd sit in the back, sharing those coffees he always brought, talking about everything except the obvious question of why someone with his skills was volunteering instead of working for some tech company. 3 months into our friendship, because that's what I told myself it was, we were riding the late bus through downtown. The city lights blurred past rain-streaked windows, and exhaustion made me more honest than usual. Sometimes I think about leaving, I admitted, watching the buildings pass. Just getting on a different bus and seeing where it goes. Somewhere nobody knows me, where I could be anybody. Why don't you? My mother. I shifted in the uncomfortable seat. She needs dialysis 3 times a week. Her insurance barely covers it. If I left, who would make sure she got to appointments? Who would fight with the insurance company when they deny claims? Who would make sure she takes her medications? Casil was quiet for so long I thought I'd killed the conversation. Then he said, most people would resent that responsibility. Most people didn't have Marion Brooks working 3 jobs to keep them fed. I pulled my jacket tighter. She gave up everything for me. The least I can do is stay. You're remarkable, he said quietly. I laughed, short and bitter. Yeah, remarkably stuck. Sometimes I joke that I just need someone to drop 100 grand in my lap, solve all my problems with 1 check. Money doesn't solve problems, he said, and something in his voice made me look at him. It just creates different ones, spoken like someone who's never chosen between electricity and groceries. You're right. He met my eyes. I apologize. That was thoughtless. It's fine. We all have our perspectives. I stood as my stop approached. See you Thursday? Wouldn't miss it. The night everything shifted, We were alone in the center, cleaning up after a coding workshop Cassiel had organized. 20 kids had shown up, twice our usual number, and the energy had been electric. Kids who usually struggled to sit still had coded for 2 straight hours, creating simple games, their faces lit with the glow of creation. "You were amazing with them," I said, stacking chairs. "That kid Thomas actually smiled. I've never seen him smile. They just needed to see that code isn't about rules," Cassiel replied, wiping down tables. "It's about possibility. You can build entire worlds with just logic and imagination." "Is that what you do? Build worlds?" He paused, spray bottle in hand. "I try to. Sometimes I tear them down instead. Sometimes that's necessary before rebuilding. Very philosophical for a consultant. Leighton. The way he said my name made me stop moving. "Can I tell you something? Always. You're the most intelligent person I've met who has no idea how intelligent she is." He set down the spray bottle, moved closer. "You could run circles around half the people I work with. You see solutions where others see problems. You understand people, systems, patterns." "I'm a part-time tutor with community college credits," I said, uncomfortable with the praise. "That's not exactly genius territory. Intelligence isn't about credentials. It's about capability." He was standing close now, close enough that I could smell his detergent, something expensive that he probably didn't realize was expensive. "If someone dropped that 100 grand in your lap tomorrow, you wouldn't buy things. You'd invest in people. You'd expand this center, hire better teachers, and create scholarships. How do you know what I'd do?" "Because I've watched you for 3 months. You take your coffee black, not because you prefer it, but to save the 50 cents they charge for milk. You wear shoes held together with superglue rather than spend money that might be needed for your mother's prescriptions. You give everything to everyone else. That's not intelligence. That's just life. It's love," he said. "And that's the highest intelligence there is." The air between us changed, charged with something I'd been ignoring for weeks. He lifted his hand to my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone, giving me time to step back, to stop this before it started. I didn't step back. The kiss was soft, tentative, asking permission even as it happened. I answered by rising onto my toes, pressing closer, letting myself want something for the first time in years. His arms came around me, and I felt safe in a way that had nothing to do with physical protection and everything to do with being seen, valued, chosen. When we finally separated, both breathing unsteadily, he pressed his forehead to mine. "I should tell you something," he whispered. But Thursday became another Thursday, and another, each one deepening what we'd started with that kiss. Cassiel became my escape from exhaustion, my reason to smile at terrible jobs, my secret happiness in a life that had forgotten to provide joy. His last name sat between us like an undetonated bomb, ticking toward an explosion I didn't see coming. Monroe. Such a simple word, such a devastating truth, because Cassiel Monroe wasn't just a volunteer with a passion for teaching kids to code. He was heir to Monroe Industries, son of billionaire Gregory Monroe, born into wealth that made my 100 grand dreams look like pocket change. It took 3 months for him to tell me the part of his name that turned our love story into a war. 3 months of falling in love with someone who'd forgotten to mention he could buy the entire community center with his monthly trust fund allowance. 3 months before the word Monroe shattered everything I thought I knew about truth, trust, and the price of keeping secrets from someone you claim to love. 6 months after that first kiss, we sat on the rooftop of Cassiel's apartment building, Chinese takeout containers between us. The city sprawled below like a circuit board of lights. His place wasn't fancy, a converted loft in an artist district, exposed brick and pipes, the kind of place young professionals rented to seem bohemian. I'd teased him about slumming it with the common folk, but tonight he wasn't laughing at my jokes. He'd been quiet all evening, pushing lo mein around his container without eating, that storm-colored gaze fixed on horizons I couldn't see. "What's eating you?" I finally asked, setting down my chopsticks. "You've been weird all week." He looked at me then, really looked, like he was memorizing my face. "If you had to choose between an ugly truth and comfortable ignorance, which would you pick? Depends. Are we talking about you being secretly married, or running a cult, or maybe you're a crime lord who uses volunteer work as cover?" Leighton, the seriousness in his voice made my stomach flip. Truth. Always true. Lies have a way of growing teeth and biting you later. He nodded, set down his food, and stood to pace the small rooftop garden he'd cultivated. Tomatoes and herbs in recycled containers. Another part of his carefully normal life. "My father is Gregory Monroe." The name floated between us for a moment, before landing with its full weight. "Gregory Monroe," I repeated slowly, "as in Monroe Capital, as in the billionaire who owns half the commercial real estate in the city, founder and CEO of Monroe Industries, actually. The capital management firm is just one subsidiary." His voice was flat, factual, like he was reading a Wikipedia entry. "Net worth, approximately 4.7 billion at last Forbes estimate, and I'm his only son, heir apparent. One of those Monroes." I stood there, Chinese food cooling between us, processing this information like a computer with insufficient RAM. Monroe Capital. I'd seen their logo on buildings, read articles about their aggressive acquisition strategies, their habit of buying struggling companies and either reviving or gutting them for parts. "You're a billionaire." The words came out strangled. "My father is a billionaire. I'm just—" He gestured vaguely at himself, still in those worn jeans I'd thought were authentically working class. "I'm supposed to be his successor, the next Monroe to run the empire." A laugh bubbled up, inappropriate and unstoppable. Oh my God. All those times I complained about rich people, that rant about billionaires hoarding resources while community centers run on donations. He just sat there. What was I supposed to say? "Actually, my trust fund could buy this entire neighborhood." That would have been a start. I sank onto the rooftop's lone bench, head spinning. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because the second I do, everything changes. You stop seeing Casil and start seeing Monroe money. Everyone does." He sat beside me, careful not to touch. "I wanted you to know me first, the real me, not the net worth." I thought about the past 6 months, his patience with the kids, the way he fixed things without being asked, how he listened to my mother's medical updates like they mattered. That was real. That had to be real. "Okay," I said finally. "So you're loaded. You're still the guy who taught Thomas to code, who rides the bus with me even though you probably have a Lamborghini." "Aston Martin," he corrected with a slight smile. "It's in storage." "Of course it is." He explained the rules then, the golden chains that came with the Monroe name. To access his trust fund fully, he had to work at Monroe Capital, learn the business, eventually take over. Marriage required board approval. They actually had a list of appropriate families, like some medieval alliance system. Public appearances, charity galas, maintaining the Monroe image. "I'm an asset," he said bitterly. "Not a son. An investment my father made that needs to show proper returns. So rebel. Walk away." People do it. With what? Every skill I have, every education I received, was paid for with Monroe money. Every connection, every opportunity. Walking away means starting from absolute zero. I started from zero. It's survivable. You started from zero with freedom. I'd be starting from zero with a target on my back. My father doesn't let assets depreciate quietly. 2 weeks later, everything shifted. Casil had met with his father that afternoon. I'd waited in his car in the Monroe Capital parking garage, feeling small among the Bentleys and Teslas. When he returned, his face was carved from stone. "He knows about you," Casil said, sliding into the driver's seat. "About us, and he's offering me a deal. Junior partner track, full backing for my tech ventures, but only if I stop playing in the sandbox. his words, and commit fully to the firm, meaning stop volunteering. Stop seeing me, stop pretending I'm not Monroe. His knuckles were white on the steering wheel. He's giving me a month to decide. There's nothing to decide. Tell him to shove his deal. It's not that simple. Freedom? He laughed, harsh and unlike him. You think there's freedom in poverty? You think those kids at the center are free? They're trapped by circumstance just like I'm trapped by wealth. At least they're honestly trapped. You're choosing your cage. That's easy for you to say. The words came out sharp, angry. You've never had the option of real power, real resources. You don't know what you'd choose if someone offered you the ability to actually change things instead of just tutoring 20 kids who'll probably end up exactly where their parents are. The words hit like ice water. I saw it then, the gap between us, wide as an ocean. He could play it normal, volunteer at community centers, ride public buses, but underneath, he'd always have that safety net woven from billions. You're right, I said quietly. I don't know what I'd choose, but I know what you're choosing, and it's not me. 3 days later, he called with news that felt like a countdown starting. There's a deal in London, acquisition that needs oversight, then Singapore for the Asian market expansion. His voice was carefully neutral over the phone. My father wants me to lead it, prove myself. How long? 6 months minimum, maybe a year, and then I have leverage, experience, my own connections that aren't just his. You're taking the deal. It wasn't a question. Come with me. The words rushed out. London, Singapore, wherever. I'll pay for everything, your mother's treatment, the best doctors, everything she needs. I thought about my mother, hooked to a dialysis machine 3 times a week, her whole life tethered to a 3-mile radius of the clinic. Thought about yanking her from her doctors, her routine, her fragile stability, all to follow a man choosing his father's money over our future. I can't leave her. You know that. Then wait for me. I'll come back different, stronger, able to stand up to him. You'll come back as exactly what he wants you to be, his heir, his copy, his continuation. We met one last time before he left, at the community center where everything had started. The kids were gone, the lights dimmed, just us among the computers we built together. I love you, he said, holding my face between his palms. That won't change. Love isn't enough if you're on the other side of the world becoming someone else. I'll call, email, every day if you want, until you don't, until the meetings run late and the deals get complex and I become that girl from that life you used to have. He kissed me then, desperate and deep, like he could pour promise into my mouth and make me believe, and for that moment I did believe. Believed that love could survive distance and different worlds, that he could navigate his father, empire, without becoming his father. I'll come back, he swore against my lips. Not as Monroe. As for myself, for you, I'll be here, I whispered, already knowing it was a lie. Already knowing that when he left, I'd have to close that door completely or spend my life waiting for someone who'd chosen money over love. At first he kept his promise. Calls at odd hours from different time zones, emails full of details about deals I didn't understand, and people whose names sounded like currency. He sent photos of London rain, Singapore skylines, hotel rooms that looked like magazines. Then the calls grew shorter. The emails became summaries instead of stories. 2 months in, I started getting his voicemail more often than his voice. 3 months in, my emails got brief responses. Crazy week. Will write more soon. Soon it never came. By month 4, my calls wouldn't connect. International routing error, the automated voice claimed. My emails started bouncing back. When I called Monroe Capital directly, I got transferred to an assistant named Victoria Shaw, who spoke in tones that could freeze fire. Mr. Monroe is occupied with essential business matters. If you'd like to leave a message, I can add it to his queue. His queue? I'm his girlfriend. I have no record of that designation. If you're pressed, please go through our public relations department. The line went dead. I sat there holding my phone, understanding with crystal clarity that I'd been erased. Whatever story Cassiel was telling himself in Singapore, it didn't include a community college girl from the wrong side of the city. I found out I was pregnant the same week I saw his photo in a business magazine. Cassiel Monroe, the next generation of Monroe leadership. He looked different, sharper suit, harder eyes, standing next to his father like a reflection in an expensive mirror. I sat on my bathroom floor, pregnancy test in one hand, magazine in the other, and laughed until I cried. Then I cried until I couldn't breathe. The irony was perfect. I finally had a piece of him that couldn't be taken away, couldn't be managed by assistants or controlled by his father. I made lists, practical ones. Pros, it's mine. I want it. I can love it enough for 2 parents. Cons, everything else. The cons didn't matter. This baby was mine, conceived in love even if that love had been dismantled by distance and dollars. I tried one more time to reach him, wrote a letter, actual paper and ink, mailed to Monroe Capital with personal and confidential marked across it. Short, factual. Cassiel, I'm pregnant. The baby is yours. I'm not asking for anything, just thought you should know. If you want to be involved, you know where to find me. If not, I understand. Leighton. No response. The silence became his answer. Naomi was born on a Tuesday during a thunderstorm that knocked power out across half the city. She came out silent, eyes wide open, studying the world like she was cataloguing its flaws. The nurse said she'd never seen a newborn look so alert, so aware. She had Cassiel's eyes, that grey-green that changed with the light, his dark hair, my stubbornness and my mother's quiet strength. Perfect, and mine, and never his. I considered sending him a photo, one last attempt. Then I remembered Victoria Shaw's voice, the designation I didn't have, the queue where my message would sit. My daughter wouldn't be an item in anyone's queue. So I gave her my name, Naomi Brooks, and promised her something I couldn't guarantee but would die trying to deliver, that she'd never have to beg for space in anyone's life, never have to prove she was worthy of love, never have to know that her father had chosen wealth over meeting her. The world could be cruel to brilliant girls who didn't fit in boxes, but it wouldn't be cruel because her father was too busy being a billionaire to answer a letter about her existence. If you've ever carried everything alone, fighting for your child when the other parent vanished into their better life, hit that like button right now. Comment, I'll fight for my kids if you understand what it means to be both parents, both the strength and the softness, both the defender and the comforter. And subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories, because these stories of single parent strength need to be heard. The signs were there from the beginning, though I didn't have the vocabulary to name them. Naomi didn't cry like other babies, she observed. At 6 months, she'd track conversations between adults like she was following tennis matches, those grey-green eyes moving from speaker to speaker with unsettling focus. By 18 months, while other toddlers were mastering Mama and Dada, Naomi was constructing complex sentences with subordinate clauses. I don't want milk because it makes my stomach feel wrong instead of just no milk. She'd build block towers not for height but for structural integrity, testing load-bearing configurations like a tiny engineer. At 3, riding the bus home from daycare, she asked why the moon followed our bus but not the other cars. When I explained about distance and relative motion, she nodded seriously and said, "So it's not really following. We just think it is because our brains like patterns that aren't there." 3 years old. At 4, she corrected Spanish subtitles on a children's movie at the community center. "That's not what he said," she announced, pointing at the screen. "The words don't match." She was right. The translation was simplified, dumbed down, and Naomi had taught herself enough Spanish from educational videos to notice. By 5, Her first week of kindergarten, she came home frustrated because they'd spent an hour coloring inside predetermined lines. Why do they want us to stay inside fake boundaries someone else drew? And why do we get stars for not thinking of better ways to fill the space? I didn't have an answer that would satisfy her. The truth that most of the world rewards conformity over creativity seemed too heavy for a 5-year-old to carry. I became a researcher for my own daughter, spending lunch breaks at the library, using their computers to search terms like gifted child characteristics and asynchronous development. The articles I found described Naomi perfectly, but offered little practical advice for single mothers making $30,000 a year. Private schools for gifted children cost more than I made. Enrichment programs ran during work hours. Specialized tutors charged rates that might as well have been in foreign currency for all the chances I had of affording them. So I improvised. Turned grocery shopping into math games. If bananas are 69 cents a pound and we have $3, how many pounds can we buy? What if they're on sale for 20% off? I answered her endless questions, even when exhaustion made my brain feel like wet cotton. When she asked why shadows changed size, we spent weekends tracking sundial patterns on our apartment's walkway. When she wondered about infinity, we watched YouTube videos about mathematics until my head spun. But late at night, after she'd finally worn herself out with questions, I'd lie awake terrified I was failing her. What if her mind needed something I couldn't provide? What if my limitations became her cage? The first parent-to-teacher conference that went sideways happened when Naomi was in preschool. Mrs. Henderson, a woman who'd been teaching for 30 years, sat me down with the expression of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis. "Naomi is extremely disruptive," she began, folding her hands over Naomi's file. "She constantly questions instructions, refuses to participate in group activities if she finds them illogical, and she corrects other children in ways that hurt their feelings." She corrects them? How? Yesterday, a boy said his father was the strongest man in the world. Naomi informed him that statistically that was impossible, and then explained how muscle mass relates to body weight ratios. I bit my lip to keep from laughing. She's 4, exactly. 4-year-olds shouldn't talk like that. It's not normal. That word would follow us through every school year like a shadow we couldn't shake. In first grade, Mrs. Williams pulled me aside after class. Unlike Mrs. Henderson, she had warmth in her eyes alongside concern. "Your daughter is extraordinary," she said. "But extraordinary children face extraordinary challenges. Some people are going to be scared of how quickly she thinks, how much she sees. Don't let them dim her light, but prepare her for the resistance." That night, I sat with Naomi at our scratched kitchen table, her homework finished in 10 minutes while other kids would spend an hour, and tried to find the right words. "Baby, some people might not understand the way you think. Because I'm weird?" She said it matter-of-factly, already internalizing the label. "Because you're exceptional, and exceptional makes some people uncomfortable. But you listen to me. Never, ever make yourself smaller to fit in someone else's box. The world needs minds like yours, even if it doesn't know it yet." Third grade was when the system really began pushing back. Naomi had devoured the entire year's reading list by October, then moved on to programming tutorials she found online. She'd finish assignments in minutes, then spend the rest of class time writing code in her notebook or reading about quantum mechanics on a tablet. I'd saved 6 months to buy her. The problems started small. She'd point out inefficiencies in classroom routines. Why did they line up alphabetically when organizing by height would move faster? Why did they copy vocabulary words 5 times when studies showed that was less effective than using them in context? Then came the scheduling incident. Naomi had noticed the school was losing 3 minutes between every class transition due to poorly planned bell schedules and hallway routes. She calculated that over a school year, students lost nearly 8 full instructional days to inefficiency. So she did what seemed logical to her. She fixed it. She accessed the school's scheduling system through a password she'd seen a teacher type and rewrote the bell schedule. She didn't add or remove time, didn't give anyone extra recess or shorter classes. She simply optimized the existing schedule for maximum efficiency. The administration lost their minds, not because she was wrong, her schedule was objectively better, but because a 9-year-old had exposed their security flaws, shown more initiative than their planning committee, and done it all without permission. They called it hacking, made it sound malicious, criminal even. She violated school security protocols, Principal Herrera had said in our first meeting about it. She improved your system, I countered, for free. Most consultants would charge thousands for that kind of efficiency analysis, but they didn't want efficiency. They wanted compliance. The state examination was supposed to be straightforward. Naomi had always tested well, her scores consistently in the highest percentiles. But this time, she did something that turned excellence into suspicion. She scored perfectly, not just high, not just exceptional, but perfect. No student in the district's history had achieved that. Worse, from the administration's perspective, she'd annotated her test. In the margins of 3 questions, she'd written explanations of why the questions themselves were flawed. One math problem had an error in its premise. One reading comprehension question had 2, potentially, correct answers depending on interpretation. One science question used outdated information about Pluto's classification. She was right about all of it, but being right and being believed are different things, especially when you're 9 and female and from the poor side of town. The testing board flagged her exam for review. The word irregularities appeared in formal letters. Suddenly, my daughter wasn't gifted. She was suspicious. The change in Naomi was gradual, then sudden. She stopped raising her hand in class, even when she knew answers. She began accepting errors in worksheets without comment. The child who once questioned everything grew quiet, careful, contained. One evening, I found her crying over her homework, not because it was difficult, but because she deliberately answered a question incorrectly. The right answer wasn't one of the choices, she explained through tears. But if I write what I know is true, they'll say I'm being difficult again. So what did you write? The wrong answer they wanted. My heart broke into pieces sharp enough to cut. My brilliant daughter was learning to hide her light, to pretend she couldn't see what she saw, know what she knew. I'm weird, Mom, she said, and the word came out like a confession of guilt. The other kids think I'm weird. The teachers think I'm weird. Maybe I should just try to be normal. Baby, I pulled her close, feeling her trembling against me. Normal is just average in disguise, and you, my love, were never meant to be average. But even as I said it, I wondered if I was setting her up for a lifetime of fighting systems that preferred average to exceptional. The incidents accumulated like evidence in a case against brilliance. Naomi refused to show her work in math because she solved problems through pattern recognition rather than step-by-step processes. She asked why too often, challenged assumptions too readily, thought too fast and too far ahead for comfort. Each teacher's report was added to her file. Struggles with authority, difficulty following standard procedures, disruptive to classroom management. They painted a picture of a problem child, when what they really meant was a child whose mind worked in ways that made their jobs harder. The final straw was a combination of everything: the perfect test score under investigation, the scheduling system incident, still rankling administration, her consistent challenges to curriculum errors, and a new complaint that she'd been teaching interested classmates to code during recess, which apparently violated some unwritten rule about unsanctioned learning. Principal Herrera's email requesting an urgent disciplinary meeting arrived on a Tuesday. By Thursday, I was sitting in that squeaky chair, watching 3 adults discuss my daughter's future like she was a problem to be solved, rather than a mind to be nurtured. That's how we ended up in that office, with my daughter's whole future hanging on people who mistook brilliance for misbehavior. They had no idea that this fight would wake the ghost of Cassiel Monroe, that their attempt to expel a 9-year-old would ultimately lead to a billionaire discovering he had a daughter. They saw a problem child with a disruptive mother. They had no idea they were about to trigger a revolution. After leaving Principal Herrera's office, with Naomi's suspension notice in hand, I drove straight to the public library. While Naomi settled at a computer to work on coding projects, I searched for cognitive specialists who might evaluate her without bankrupting us. The results were disheartening. Most specialists required referrals from pediatricians. Most didn't accept our basic insurance. Most charged between $2,000 and $5,000 for comprehensive evaluations. I had $83 in my checking account, and rent was already 6 days late. "Mom, what are you looking for?" Naomi appeared at my shoulder, those grey-green eyes scanning my screen faster than I could minimize it. "Just some information about testing," I said vaguely. "For me, not a question. Because they think I'm cheating when I'm not. They don't understand how your mind works, baby. We need someone who can explain it to them." She nodded, processing this with her usual efficiency. "You're worried about money. I'll figure it out. The evaluation costs approximately $3,000 based on market rates in our area," she said, having clearly read my screen. "Our current financial reserves are insufficient. Sometimes I forgot she was 9. Sometimes she spoke like the adult she'd eventually become, analyzing problems with cold precision that reminded me so much of her father it made my chest ache. I said I'll figure it out. She studied me, then nodded once. "I believe you will." Her faith was both beautiful and terrifying. I couldn't fail her. Not this time. Not when her future depended on it. That evening, after Naomi went to bed, I called every specialist in a 50-mile radius. Most receptionists gave me the same answer: 3-month waiting list minimum, insurance pre-approval required, deposit of at least $500 to secure an appointment. On my 14th call to a Dr. Eliza Taylor, I expected the same response. Instead, a woman answered directly. "Dr. Taylor speaking." I stumbled through my rehearsed speech about needing an evaluation for my gifted daughter who was facing expulsion. "Expulsion?" Her voice sharpened. "How old is your daughter?" "9, and they're threatening expulsion. For what exactly?" I explained the situation, the perfect test score, the scheduling system, the constant corrections of errors. Instead of dismissing me, Dr. Taylor made a sound of recognition. "Your daughter sounds like she has an exceptional cognitive profile. I've worked with similar children." She paused. "Normally I have a waiting list, but this situation sounds urgent. I could see her next week." My relief crashed against the reality of my bank account. "That's incredibly kind, but I need to be honest. I can't afford your standard rates right now." Another pause. "Are you familiar with the Monroe Foundation?" The name hit me like a physical blow. Monroe? As in Monroe Capital? The foundation is separate from the corporation. They fund educational initiatives, including a program that provides cognitive evaluations for exceptional children from lower-income backgrounds. My throat closed. Of all the specialists in the city, I had called one connected to the Monroe name. The universe had a cruel sense of humor. I'm not sure that would work for us." "Why not?" "Based on what you've described, your daughter would qualify. The foundation covers all costs, because the money came from Cassiel's father, because accepting it felt like opening a door I'd nailed shut years ago, because some part of me still burned with anger at the name Monroe. But Naomi needed this evaluation. My pride wasn't worth her future. How do we apply? The Monroe Foundation offices occupied the 15th floor of a glass tower downtown. The receptionist directed me to a small conference room where a woman in her 60s waited with a folder of paperwork. "Miss Brooks, I'm Margaret Winters, program coordinator for the Educational Access Initiative. She extended her hand. Dr. Taylor spoke highly of your daughter's situation. I shook her hand, trying not to stare at the Monroe Foundation logo on the wall behind her, a stylized M that looked too much like the one I'd seen on Cassiel's cufflinks years ago. Thank you for seeing me on such short notice. We prioritize cases where children are at risk of educational displacement. She slid the folder toward me. The application is straightforward. Basic information, financial verification, and permission for Dr. Taylor to share her findings with the Foundation. I flipped through the forms, scanning for catches, for traps, and if she qualifies, the Foundation covers everything? Everything. The evaluation, any recommended educational interventions, even private school tuition, if that's what Dr. Taylor recommends. It sounded too good to be true. Why would the Monroe family care about kids like Naomi? Margaret's expression softened. Gregory Monroe's wife, Elena, was identified as profoundly gifted as a child. Her family couldn't afford proper educational support, and she struggled for years before finding her path. Before she passed away, she established this foundation to ensure other children wouldn't face the same barriers. Elena Monroe. Cassiel had mentioned her. The mother who insisted he understand how most people lived. The mother who died when he was in college, whose loss had shaped him in ways I'd only glimpsed. The current director continues her mission with particular attention to children who show exceptional promise in mathematics and computer science, Margaret continued. Who is the current director? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Cassiel Monroe, Gregory's son. I left the foundation with approved paperwork and an appointment for Naomi with Dr. Taylor the following Tuesday. The entire drive home, my thoughts churned with the impossible coincidence. Cassiel was funding programs for gifted children. Cassiel might indirectly pay for his own daughter's evaluation without ever knowing she existed. The irony was almost too perfect. That night, I sat at our kitchen table long after Naomi had gone to bed, staring at the Monroe Foundation paperwork. Was I using them? Was I betraying some ethical principle by accepting help from the family of the man who'd abandoned me without knowing about his child? Or was I betraying Naomi by hesitating to use every resource available to help her? I thought about calling the foundation, asking to speak directly to Cassiel, finally telling him about Naomi. But what would that accomplish now, after 9 years of silence? Would it help Naomi, or would it just satisfy my need for him to acknowledge what he'd left behind? In the end, I signed the papers. Naomi's needs came before my complicated feelings about her father. If the Monroe money could open doors for her that I couldn't, I'd swallow my pride and walk through them. Dr. Taylor's office was nothing like I'd expected. Instead of sterile white walls and uncomfortable chairs, it looked like a cross between a library and a playroom. Bookshelves lined with academic texts stood beside tables covered with puzzles, building blocks, and what looked like scientific equipment. Dr. Taylor herself was a woman with short silver hair and rectangular glasses that magnified her sharp eyes. She greeted us with a firm handshake for me and a respectful nod for Naomi. "You must be Naomi Brooks," she said, addressing my daughter directly. "I understand you've been having some difficulties at school." "They think I'm cheating because I see solutions they don't expect," Naomi replied, her voice matter-of-fact. Dr. Taylor's mouth quirked. "That happens to people whose minds work differently than the standard model. Would you like to find out how your mind works?" For the first time in weeks, I saw genuine interest in Naomi's eyes. "Yes, good. I'm going to ask you to do some activities today. They might seem like games or puzzles, but they're designed to show me how you think. There are no wrong answers, just different approaches. Are you comfortable with that?" Naomi nodded. "Excellent. Miss Brooks, you're welcome to wait in the reception area. This first session will take about 2 hours. I hesitated, reluctant to leave Naomi with a stranger, even one who seemed to understand her. "Mom," Naomi said quietly, "I'll be fine." The confidence in her voice decided me. "I'll be right outside if you need me." Over the next week, Dr. Taylor conducted a series of assessments. Some were standard IQ tests. Others involved complex problem-solving, pattern recognition, and creative thinking. She recorded Naomi working through mathematical proofs, observed her coding solutions to logic problems, and engaged her in philosophical discussions that would challenge most adults. After each session, Naomi emerged energized rather than drained. "Dr. Taylor doesn't think I'm weird," she told me after the third day. "She says my brain is like a different operating system." On the final day, Dr. Taylor asked to speak with me alone while Naomi worked on a special project in another room. "Ms. Brooks," she began, "I've completed Naomi's evaluation and I need to prepare you for the results." My stomach tightened. "Is something wrong?" "Quite the opposite. Your daughter has one of the most remarkable minds I've encountered in 30 years of practice. Her IQ is off the charts, literally beyond the ceiling of standard tests. But more importantly, she has a unique cognitive architecture that allows her to see patterns and connections most people miss entirely." Pride and fear tangled in my chest. What does that mean for her education? It means a standard classroom will never serve her needs. It would be like asking an Olympic sprinter to walk in slow circles all day, not just boring, but actively harmful to development. So what do? Private school? I can't afford. The Monroe Foundation will cover it, Dr. Taylor interrupted gently. There's a school specifically designed for children like Naomi, the Athena Academy for Exceptional Learners. It's expensive, yes, but with the foundation support, it's an option. And if we don't get her into a place like that, Dr. Taylor's expression grew serious. Children with minds like Naomi's, who don't receive appropriate education, often develop significant emotional and behavioral issues. Depression, anxiety, acting out. Some deliberately underperform to fit in. Others become so frustrated they disconnect entirely. I thought of Naomi's recent quietness, her deliberate wrong answers, her dimming spark. It was already happening. I'll recommend immediate placement at Athena Academy with additional mentorship in computer science and mathematics. The foundation will approve it based on my assessment. All because of Elena Monroe's legacy, I murmured. Dr. Taylor gave me an odd look, and her son's commitment to continuing it. Cassiel Monroe has expanded the program significantly in recent years. He reviews many of the cases personally. My blood froze. Personally, for the most exceptional candidates, yes. Your daughter's case will certainly cross his desk. I left Dr. Taylor's office with Naomi's preliminary results and a growing sense of dread. If Cassiel reviewed the exceptional cases personally, he would see Naomi's file. He would see her name, Brooks, not Monroe. He would see her age, 9 years old. He would see her photo, those grey-green eyes that mirrored his own. Would he make the connection? Would he recognize the timing, do the math, realize what I'd kept from him? Or would Naomi's file be just another piece of paperwork, another gifted child to support through his mother's foundation, never knowing she was his own daughter? As we drove home, Naomi watched the city pass by, her mind clearly processing everything she'd learned during the evaluation. "Dr. Taylor says I'm not broken," she said suddenly. "She says my brain is just configured differently." "She's right, baby. You're perfect exactly as you are." She says there's a school where kids like me learn at their own pace, where asking questions is good, not disruptive. The Athena Academy. "We're going to try to get you in there." Naomi nodded, satisfied. I calculated the probability of acceptance based on Dr. Taylor's confidence level and the Foundation's historical approval rate. It's approximately 94.3%. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "That's very precise. I like precision." She turned those eyes, his eyes, to me. Mom, who funds the Monroe Foundation. The question I'd been dreading. A family called the Monroes. They're very wealthy. Why would they pay for my school? Because your father is one of them. Because you're a Monroe too, even if you don't know it. Because the universe has a twisted sense of humor. They believe every child deserves the right education, even if their parents can't afford it. Naomi considered this. That's statistically unusual for wealthy people. Yes, I agreed, thinking of Cassiel's mother, the woman who'd insisted he understand how most people lived. Yes, it is. What I didn't tell her was that we were now on a collision course with her father. That Dr. Taylor's report would land on Cassiel Monroe's desk. That the past I'd buried was about to resurface in ways I couldn't control. The ghost of Cassiel Monroe was stirring, and I had no idea what would happen when he discovered the daughter he never knew existed. While we waited for Dr. Taylor's official report to make its way through the Monroe Foundation's approval process, Naomi's suspension ended. I walked her back into school, both of us tense with anticipation. The hallways felt hostile now, the fluorescent lights too harsh, the motivational posters on the walls suddenly sinister in their bland encouragement. Principal Herrera met us at the office, her smile tight and professional. "Welcome back, Naomi. I trust you've had time to reflect on appropriate school behavior." Naomi looked at her with those clear, assessing eyes. "I've reflected on systems that prioritize compliance over learning, yes." I squeezed her shoulder in warning. We needed to get through the next few weeks without further incident, just until the Foundation approved her transfer to Athena Academy. "What my daughter means," I interjected smoothly, "is that we've had productive conversations about working within established frameworks." "Excellent." Principal Herrera handed Naomi a hall pass. "You may go to class now." Naomi hesitated, looking up at me. "It's okay," I assured her. "Remember what we talked about. Sometimes the smartest move is to play by their rules until you can change the game." She nodded, understanding the strategy if not agreeing with it, and walked down the hall with her characteristic precision, each step deliberate, her backpack perfectly centered on her narrow shoulders. "Miss Brooks," Principal Herrera said once Naomi was out of earshot, "I hope you understand that while we're allowing Naomi to return pending the evaluation results, we're watching closely. Any further incidents will result in immediate action." "I understand completely," I replied, matching her professional tone, "and I hope you understand that I'm watching closely too. Any unfair targeting of my daughter will result in immediate action from me as well." Her smile tightened further. "We're simply enforcing standard policies, and I'm simply protecting my child. Have a wonderful day, Principal Herrera." I walked out feeling like I'd won a small battle in what was becoming an exhausting war, but wars require resources, and mine were dangerously depleted. I headed straight to my shift at the local diner, where I'd picked up extra hours to cover the rent I still hadn't managed to pay. Meanwhile, in an office I'd never seen, in a building I'd only glimpsed from the outside, Cassiel Monroe was about to receive a file that would change everything. Cassiel Monroe's office occupied the top floor of the Monroe Foundation building, deliberately separate from the Monroe Capital headquarters where his father still reigned. The Foundation was his domain, the one place where Gregory Monroe's influence was limited by legal structures and Cassiel's absolute control of his mother's legacy. He sat at his desk that morning, reviewing the latest batch of exceptional candidate files. This was his favorite part of the job, identifying children with extraordinary potential and ensuring they received the support his mother never had. Each approval felt like a small victory against the educational system that had failed Elena Monroe until she was nearly an adult. His assistant, James, placed a new stack of folders on his desk. The priority cases from Dr. Taylor just arrived. She specifically flagged the top one as urgent. Cassiel nodded, already reaching for the file. Dr. Taylor rarely used the urgent designation. Her recommendations were always thoughtful, her assessments precise. If she considered a case urgent, it truly was. He opened the folder and saw the name, Naomi Brooks. A standard case at first glance. 9-year-old female, single mother, financial hardship, exceptional test scores. Then he began reading Dr. Taylor's assessment, and his coffee grew cold beside him, forgotten. Subject demonstrates cognitive abilities beyond any standard measurement scale, pattern recognition skills that border on prescient, mathematical reasoning at university level, coding capabilities that suggest intuitive understanding of computational logic. The report continued for pages, each observation more extraordinary than the last. Dr. Taylor had included samples of Naomi's work, complex algorithms written in a child's careful handwriting, mathematical proofs that showed leaps of intuition that bypassed traditional steps. Cassiel recognized the thought patterns. They mirrored his own. He turned to the biographical information. Mother, Leighton Brooks. Father, not listed. Something tugged at his memory. Leighton Brooks. The name was familiar, though he couldn't immediately place it. He flipped to the attached photo and froze. A girl with dark hair and grey-green eyes stared back at him. Eyes that looked startlingly like his own. Eyes that held the same analytical intensity he saw in the mirror every morning. 9 years old. He did the math quickly. 10 years ago he'd been in Singapore. Before that, London. Before that there had been a community centre, a woman under a table fixing computers, coffee on cold evenings, a kiss that had changed everything. Leighton Brooks. His hands shook as he turned back to the mother's information, current address, employment history, the note that she'd been initially reluctant to accept foundation assistance. He reached for his phone, then stopped. What would he say? Hello, is this the woman I abandoned a decade ago? Did I father your child? Instead, he called Dr. Taylor. The Brooks case, he said without preamble when she answered. Tell me more about the mother. Leighton. She's remarkable herself, working multiple jobs, clearly intelligent though without formal higher education, completely dedicated to her daughter. Why? Did she mention anything about Naomi's father? A pause. No, that seemed to be a sensitive subject. Is it relevant to the funding decision? No. The funding is approved. Immediate placement at Athena, full scholarship, additional resources as needed. He hesitated. And Dr. Taylor? Don't inform them yet. I'll handle this case personally. He hung up before she could question him further, then sat staring at the photo of Naomi Brooks. His daughter. It had to be. The timing, the eyes, the exceptional mind, too many coincidences to ignore. A daughter he never knew existed. A child who had inherited his cognitive architecture, his way of seeing the world. A brilliant mind being stifled in a system that feared what it didn't. Understand exactly the situation his mother had faced, exactly what the foundation was created to prevent. And Leighton. What must she think of him? That he'd received her messages and chosen to ignore them. That he'd known about his child and stayed away. He had to find her. I had to explain. Had to make this right, if that was even possible after so many years. He pulled up the Foundation's database, found the employment information in Leighton's file. Current workplace, Doris Miller's diner. Evening shifts, Tuesday through Saturday. Today was Tuesday. I was halfway through my shift at the diner, refilling coffee cups and taking orders with the mechanical efficiency that comes from years of practice. My mind was elsewhere, on Naomi, on the school, on the rent I still hadn't paid, on the foundation that might save my daughter's future, through the most ironic twist of fate imaginable. Leighton. Doris's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood by the register, looking oddly concerned. Someone's asking for you. By name? Reporter? I asked, immediately wary. The school situation had attracted some local attention, and I'd already turned down 2 requests for interviews. I turned, following her gaze, and the world stopped spinning. Cassiel Monroe sat in my section, 10 years older than when I'd last seen him. His dark hair was shorter now, styled with precision rather than neglect. The boyish softness had hardened into defined angles. He wore a charcoal suit with the jacket removed, sleeves rolled to expose forearms I remembered too well, tie loosened at his throat. Those grey-green eyes, Naomi's eyes, found mine across the diner. My coffee pot nearly slipped from suddenly numb fingers. Shock gave way to anger, then a strange calm. I'd imagined this moment 1,000 times over the years. Now that it was happening, I felt oddly prepared, like an actor who'd rehearsed her lines until they became reflex. "How did you find me?" I asked, not bothering with hello. "Your daughter's file came across my desk." His voice was deeper than I remembered, or maybe memory had softened its edges. Naomi Brooks, age 9, exceptional cognitive profile. Mother, Leighton Brooks. I crossed my arms. "So you thought you'd just drop by, after 10 years of silence?" "I'm working. I'll pay for your shift." The offer came automatically reflexive, and I saw him wince as soon as the words left his mouth. "Still think money solves everything?" I shook my head. "Some things haven't changed. That's not." He stopped, recalibrated. "I'm sorry. That was thoughtless. I just need 30 minutes of your time, Leighton. Please catch me off guard." The Cassiel I'd known rarely asked for anything. Cassiel who'd become Monroe never had to. "My break's in 15 minutes, I said finally. "You get until it's over." When I returned, I slid into the booth across from him, keeping the table between us like a shield. "Is she mine?" he asked without preamble. The directness was almost refreshing. "She's 9 years old. Do the math." He closed his eyes briefly, like a man absorbing a physical blow. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I did." The words came out sharper than I intended. "You chose not to hear. That's not possible." His hands, still those same hands that had once traced patterns on my skin, clenched on the table. I would never have ignored something like that. And yet, he looked at me then, really looked, with an intensity that made me want to turn away. "She has my eyes." "Yes, and she's brilliant. The report says her cognitive architecture is unlike anything they've seen." "Yes." He exhaled slowly, a sound somewhere between wonder and devastation. "I have a daughter." The words hung between us, simple and world-changing. At that moment, I saw something crack in the polished exterior of Cassiel Monroe, billionaire. For the first time in our conversation, I glimpsed the man I'd once loved, the one who felt things deeply beneath his analytical surface. "I tried to reach you," he said after a long silence. "When I came back from Singapore, I called your old number. It was disconnected. I emailed. They bounced. I sent letters to your apartment. They came back marked, 'Return to sender.' You expect me to believe that? It's the truth." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. My father's team had been aggressively filtering my contacts, protecting the Monroe interests, they called it. Victoria Shaw was instructed to screen everything, eliminate distractions and potential risks. "So blame your assistant. Convenient? No." His response was immediate, firm. "I'm not blaming anyone but myself. I let them control my access. I didn't fight hard enough to maintain connections to my old life. When I couldn't reach you, I told myself you'd moved on. It was easier than admitting I'd failed. Failed at what, exactly? At being the person I promised you I'd be. At not becoming my father." The words hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. I remembered that last promise, whispered against my lips at the community center. "I'll come back, not as a Monroe. As for myself, For you. I called your office, I said, the words burning my throat. I got some Ice Queen assistant who treated me like I was selling magazine subscriptions. I sent a letter to Monroe Capital, addressed to you personally, telling you I was pregnant with your child. I never heard back. His face paled. I never got that letter. Your silence was my answer, Cassiel. I raised our daughter believing her father chose money and power over knowing she existed. I would never. You did. I cut him off. Whether you meant to or not, you did. I worked 3 jobs while pregnant. I gave birth alone. I stayed up nights with a colicky baby while finishing my degree. I taught her to walk, to read, to question everything. I did it all without you because you weren't there. He didn't try to defend himself further. Instead, he nodded, accepting the weight of my words. You're right. I wasn't there, and nothing I say now changes that. His voice was steady, though his eyes betrayed deeper emotion. I was a coward. I let myself be absorbed into the Monroe machine because it was easier than fighting it. I didn't try hard enough to keep my promises to you. He leaned forward. But I swear to you, Leighton, I would never have knowingly abandoned my child. Never. The moment I saw that file, the moment I realized who Naomi might be, I dropped everything. I'm here now because I want to be present in her life, if you'll allow it. When I read her profile, he continued, it was like seeing myself at that age. The way she approaches problems, the annotations on her test, her coding logic, it's exactly how my mind works. I built the Foundation's educational institute specifically for children like her. Like I was. He pulled out his phone, showed me a photo of a modern building with the Elena Monroe Institute for Exceptional Minds across its entrance. My mother struggled her whole life because no one understood how her brain worked. I created this place for children who think differently, who see patterns others miss, who need space to develop without constraints. His voice softened. I built it for children exactly like the daughter I didn't know I had. Let me be clear about something, I said, setting down my coffee cup with deliberate care. Naomi is not a PR opportunity. She's not going to be paraded in front of cameras as the billionaire's secret daughter. She's not going to be used to humanize the Monroe brand. That's not what I'm not finished. I met his gaze steadily. You don't get to buy your way into her life with fancy schools and trust funds. You don't get to swoop in for graduation and birthdays while missing the everyday stuff. If, and that's a massive if, you become part of her life, you're in for science fair projects and nightmares and arguments about bedtime. You're in for the mundane, not just the milestones. I want all of it, he said without hesitation. The science fairs, the nightmares, the arguments. I've spent 10 years performing as Cassiel Monroe, heir and executive. I'm tired of it. I want something real. He outlined what he could provide for Naomi, a customized education program at the Institute, support for her unique cognitive needs, advocacy when systems failed to understand her. All of it independent from his father's control. I can set up a satellite program here, he said, restructure my work to be physically present. The foundation is mine, not my father's. I have autonomy there. He hesitated, then added, and if possible, I'd like another chance with you too. That's not on the table right now. I understand. He nodded, accepting the boundary. Naomi comes first. Naomi will decide, I said finally. If she wants to meet you, we'll arrange it. If she doesn't, you'll respect that. This is her life we're talking about, not yours or mine. Of course. Relief washed over his features. Whatever she wants, however she wants to proceed, I'll follow her lead. I stood, my break over, the weight of the past hour settling on my shoulders. I'll talk to her tonight. I'll call you with her decision. He handed me a business card, simple white stock with just his name and number, not the embossed Monroe Capital logo I'd expected. Thank you, he said simply, for raising her. For being strong enough for both of us. I took the card, our fingers brushing briefly. I didn't do it for you. I know. That's why I'm thanking you. I walked out of that diner with the billionaire's card in my pocket and the father of my child waiting on my answer. But the only approval that mattered was Naomi's. She'd spent 9 years without a father. She would decide if she wanted one now. That night, I sat with Naomi at our kitchen table, her homework already finished, a mug of hot chocolate cooling between her hands. I'd practiced this conversation a dozen different ways in my head, but now that the moment had arrived, all my careful script evaporated. Dr. Taylor's evaluation was exceptional, I began. She's recommending a specialized school called the Elena Monroe Institute. Naomi nodded, those grey-green eyes watching me with unnerving focus. I looked it up. It's a private academy for students with advanced cognitive profiles. The acceptance rate is less than 2%, but they have a scholarship program through the Monroe Foundation. Of course, she'd researched it already. That's right. The founder is Cecile Monroe. She took a careful sip of her chocolate. He looks like me. My breath caught. You found pictures of him? Google has 127 images of him from various business publications and charity events. She set down her mug with precision. We have the same eyes, the same hair, and based on the timeline of your relationship with him that I calculated from things you've mentioned over the years, plus my date of birth and standard gestation period, there's a 98.7% probability that he's my biological father. 9 years old. 9 years old, and she'd pieced it together from fragments I'd let slip over the years. Is he my dad? She asked directly. Yes, I answered, equally direct. Cecile Monroe is your father. Naomi absorbed this confirmation with the same careful analysis she applied to everything. Her fingers tapped a pattern on the table. 3 quick, 2 slow, repeat. A self-soothing behavior she'd developed when processing complex emotions. I feel angry, she said finally, because he wasn't here, and curious, because I want to know why, and a little excited, because I've always wondered what he was like. She looked up at me. Is that okay, to feel all those things at once? It's more than okay, I assured her. It's completely normal. Did you love him? The question was soft, almost hesitant. Yes, I said, very much. Do you still love him? I considered lying, simplifying, but Naomi deserved honesty. I loved who he was 10 years ago. I don't know who he is now. I'm learning, just like you would be. She nodded, processing this. I want to meet him. Once. Here, not at his office or some restaurant. I want to see him in our space. Are you sure? Yes. Her certainty was absolute. I need data to form an accurate assessment. 2 days later, at precisely 6 o'clock, our doorbell rang. Naomi, who had been pacing the apartment since 5, straightened her shirt and looked at me. I'll get it, she said. I nodded, giving her control of this moment. She walked to the door with the deliberate steps of someone approaching a scientific experiment, turned the knob, and pulled it open. Cecile stood in our hallway, visibly nervous in a way I'd never seen him. He'd dressed down, dark jeans, a simple button-down shirt, no watch or cufflinks or other markers of wealth. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly on the drive over. For a long moment, father and daughter simply looked at each other. The resemblance was startling, the same intensity of focus, the same slight tilt of the head when analyzing something new. Hello, Naomi said finally. You have heterochromia. Your left eye has more green than your right. Cecile blinked, then smiled. Yes. It's subtle, but it's there. You have it too. I know. Mom says it makes my eyes change color with my mood. May I come in? Naomi stepped back, a scientist allowing an experiment to proceed. You may. We sat at our kitchen table, the same one where I'd confirmed to Naomi that this man was her father. Cassiel perched awkwardly on one of our mismatched chairs, looking simultaneously too large for our small apartment and somehow smaller than I remembered him. Naomi wasted no time. "Why didn't you know about me?" Cassiel met her gaze directly. "Because I didn't try hard enough to stay connected to your mother. I let other people, assistants, executives, control my communications. When your mother tried to tell me about you, those people intercepted her messages. Did you ever try to find Mom after you left?" "Yes, but not well enough. I called numbers that were disconnected. I sent emails that bounced. I should have tried harder, found different ways, but I didn't." "That's not a very good excuse." "It's not an excuse at all," he replied. "It's a reason, but reasons aren't excuses. I failed. I should have done better." Naomi considered this distinction. "Did you think about us? About Mom?" "Every day for years," he said quietly, "then less often because it hurts. Then I built a life where I was too busy to think about what I'd lost. That was a mistake too." "I'm angry at you," Naomi stated, her voice matter-of-fact. "I've had questions about genetics and hereditary traits that Mom couldn't answer. I've wondered if I got my mathematical abilities from you. I've had to explain to other kids why I don't have a dad." Cassiel nodded, accepting each statement without defense. "I'm also curious about you," she continued. "I want to know if your brain works like mine, if you see patterns everywhere too, if you also can't sleep when a problem isn't solved." "I do," he confirmed. "All of those things. And I think it's kind of cool but also gross that you're famous. The other kids at school would freak out if they knew, but I don't want them to know because then they'd treat me differently." "That makes perfect sense," Cassiel said. "Being known for something you didn't do, like being someone's daughter, feels false. You want to be known for who you are, not who I am." Naomi's eyes widened slightly, surprised at being understood so completely. "Yes, exactly that." After the initial interrogation, Naomi disappeared into her room and returned with a stack of notebooks. She placed them on the table in front of Cassiel. "These are my projects," she said. "Mom doesn't understand all of them." Cassiel opened the top notebook and found pages filled with code, mathematical formulas, and system diagrams that would challenge most college students. His expression shifted from polite interest to genuine excitement. "This is a neural network design," he said, pointing to one page. "You're trying to create a pattern recognition algorithm." "It's for music," Naomi explained, leaning closer. "I want it to identify emotional patterns in compositions and then generate new pieces with similar emotional resonance. You'd need to account for cultural variations in musical interpretation," Cassiel noted, already engaged. "Western and Eastern musical traditions encode emotions differently." "I know. That's why I'm creating a multi-layered classification system based on both structural elements and cultural contexts." They bent over the notebook together, two minds operating at the same frequency, speaking a language I recognized but couldn't fully participate in. For the first time, Naomi was talking to someone who didn't need concepts simplified or explained. The relief on her face was palpable. As they worked through her notebooks, Naomi casually dropped small, devastating truths. "In kindergarten, we had to draw our families," she said, flipping to a new page of code. "The other kids drew moms and dads and dogs and stuff. I just drew me and Mom. The teacher asked where my dad was, and I said he was a scientist working on the moon. I figured that was better than saying I didn't have one." Cassiel's hand froze over the page. I watched pain flash across his face, quickly controlled. "I'm sorry," he said simply. "I should have been there for that assignment. And all the others." "You can't change that now," Naomi replied, practical as always. "No, I can't, but I can be here for future assignments, if you'll let me." "Maybe," she said, neither accepting nor rejecting. "It depends on your behavior going forward. Past performance is not always indicative of future results, but it's a significant data point. A smile touched his lips. That's fair. I observed their interaction from the kitchen counter, preparing a simple dinner while they talked. The scene was surreal. Cassiel Monroe, billionaire tech mogul, sitting at my scratched IKEA table, his designer shoes on my discount carpet, learning who his daughter was after 9 years of absence. He moved awkwardly in our small space, clearly unused to kitchens where you could touch both walls by stretching your arms. When I asked him to grab plates from the cabinet, he opened 3 wrong doors before finding them. When Naomi corrected his mental calculation of a complex equation, he laughed with genuine delight instead of wounded pride. Small moments revealed the man beneath Monroe, the way he listened completely when Naomi spoke, the careful respect with which he handled her notebooks, how he never once checked his phone despite surely having more important matters waiting. I found myself cataloguing similarities between them, not just the obvious physical traits, but gestures, thought patterns, the way they both tilted their heads when considering a problem. Nature had written her signature across them both, undeniable and profound. When it was time for him to leave, Naomi walked him to the door. I hung back, giving them space for whatever needed to be said. "Will you come back?" she asked, direct as always. "If you want me to," he replied. She considered this. "I think I do, but I have conditions. Name them. Don't make promises you can't keep. Don't hurt Mom again. Don't expect me to call you Dad until I'm ready." She listed these requirements with the precision of a contract lawyer. "And if you disappear again, I'll disown you, even if you are a billionaire." "Those are excellent terms," he said seriously. "I accept them all." After he left, Naomi returned to the kitchen where I was washing dishes. "He's acceptable," she announced. "For now. On probation." I smiled despite myself. "That's generous of you. I told him if he hurts you again, I'll disown him." She climbed onto a stool, watching me rinse plates. "Can I actually do that legally? Disown a parent? Not until you're 18. Then I'll develop a time machine." She said it with such conviction that for a moment I almost believed she could. "Nobody gets to hurt you, Mom. Not even my biological father." The fierce protectiveness in her voice made my throat tight. "Thank you, baby. Besides," she added, practical as ever, "if he messes up, we still have his foundation scholarship. Dr. Taylor already approved it." I laughed then, a real laugh that cleared some of the tension from the evening. My brilliant, calculating daughter had already figured out how to separate the benefits from the man who provided them. Would you let someone back into your life after a mistake this big, if they showed up ready to change? Comment, earn it if you believe in second chances with accountability. Like this story if you understand that family is complicated, messy, and worth fighting for. And subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories for more powerful family twists that will keep you wondering what happens next. The weeks after that first meeting established a pattern. Cassiel would text before visiting, always asking if the timing worked for us rather than assuming his schedule took priority. He'd bring educational games or coding tools for Naomi, but check with me first about whether they aligned with our values. When the school suspension ended, he attended the follow-up meeting with Principal Herrera. He didn't dominate the conversation or throw his name around. Instead, he listened, asked thoughtful questions, and suggested resources for teachers working with exceptional students. "The issue isn't Naomi," he explained to the administration. "It's a system designed for a different kind of mind. With proper training, your staff could better support students like her." He offered to fund professional development workshops on gifted education through the Monroe Foundation, not as a personal favor, but as part of the foundation's existing educational outreach. The school accepted eagerly. At home, he deferred to my established rules about screen time, bedtime, and homework completion. When Naomi tried to play us against each other, Dad would let me stay up to finish this algorithm, He backed me without hesitation. "Your mom's rules apply even when I'm here," he told her. "The algorithm will still be there tomorrow." The consistency surprised me. I'd expected grand gestures followed by gradual disappearance. Instead, he showed up for the mundane, helping with math homework, listening to Naomi explain why a particular video game had flawed physics, sitting through dinner conversations about school politics that couldn't possibly interest a billionaire. He was earning his place, one ordinary day at a time. The first time Naomi called him Dad without apparent calculation. A casual thanks, Dad, when he helped with a difficult coding problem. His eyes filled with tears, he quickly blinked away. She pretended not to notice, but later told me privately he passed the gratitude test. He didn't make it about himself. My daughter, the relationship scientist, measured her father's worthiness one interaction at a time. The school's attitude transformed with remarkable speed once they realized who Naomi's father was, a fact I found both satisfying and irritating. The same administrators who had wanted to expel her now spoke of nurturing exceptional talents and individualized educational approaches. Principal Herrera and Mrs. Rowan attended the Monroe Foundation's training on cognitive diversity. They returned with a new vocabulary and, more importantly, new understanding. "We've misread Naomi," Principal Herrera admitted during our next meeting, "and likely others. What we saw as defiance was often frustration with systems that didn't accommodate her thinking style. The school that had once compiled a disciplinary file thick enough to be a novel now quietly bragged about their exceptional student to district officials. They implemented some of Naomi's efficiency suggestions. They created an advanced coding club with her as a founding member. "They're only doing this because of who your father is," I told Naomi privately, wanting her to understand the hypocrisy. "I know," she replied, typing code without looking up. "But their motivations are irrelevant if the outcome benefits other students like me." Her pragmatism sometimes startled me. While I nursed righteous anger at how quickly money and status had solved problems that my advocacy couldn't, Naomi focused on results rather than principle. I made sure the school's transformation went beyond surface changes. I attended board meetings, asked pointed questions about policies for other gifted students, and insisted on accountability metrics for the new programs. If they were going to use Naomi as evidence of their progressive approach to education, they would have to actually progress. A rhythm developed. Casil drove Naomi to her new advanced math program on Tuesdays and Thursdays. I handled Monday coding club and Wednesday music lessons. We both attended her weekend robotics competitions, sitting side by side in uncomfortable folding chairs, cheering appropriately when her team's creation performed as designed. After events, we'd have family dinners, sometimes at modest restaurants where Casil looked comically out of place despite his casual clothes, sometimes at our apartment where he insisted on cooking and revealed a surprising talent for simple pasta dishes. I allowed him to pay for Naomi's academic needs, a high-performance laptop, online courses in advanced programming, materials for increasingly complex projects. But I drew a firm line at personal expenses. When he offered to cover our rent to make things easier, I refused. He accepted this boundary, though I sometimes caught him looking around our small apartment with a mixture of concern and admiration. Concern for the limitations, admiration for what we'd built within them. The real healing happened late at night, after Naomi went to bed. We'd sit at the kitchen table with tea or wine, talking in low voices about the years we'd missed. He told me about his father, Gregory Monroe, and the slow poisoning of their relationship. About startups he'd tried to launch that his father had systematically undermined. About his public failure when a much-hyped Monroe capital venture collapsed under his leadership, and the broken engagement to Elise Harrington, daughter of another financial dynasty, who'd been deemed appropriate by the board. I was trying to prove I could be a Monroe on my terms. he explained. Instead, I became exactly what my father wanted, a man who measured success in acquisitions and assets. I shared my own stories, nights walking the floor with a colicky baby Naomi, the terror of her first high fever, the humiliation of having my electricity shut off when a paycheck arrived late, but also my quiet triumphs, finishing my degree with a sleeping toddler on my lap, teaching Naomi to read before she was 4, building a life that was modest but stable through sheer determination. These conversations rebuilt something between us, not the passionate romance of our youth, but a deeper understanding. We were no longer the people who had fallen in love a decade ago. We were more complex, more scared, more real. 3 months after Cassiel re-entered our lives, we stood side by side at my kitchen sink, washing dishes after a family dinner. Naomi had gone to her room to work on a project, leaving us in comfortable silence punctuated by the clink of plates and the soft splash of water. "You've changed," he said, handing me a glass to dry. 10 years and a child will do that. It's more than time. He paused, considering his words. "You know yourself now. You're centered in a way you weren't before. Less willing to bend for others' comfort." I smiled slightly. "You mean I'm less accommodating? I mean you're stronger, more certain of your worth." He accepted the dried plate I handed back. "It suits you. You've changed too," I observed. "You're less flinchy, like you're waiting for someone to tell you you're doing it wrong. You used to have this tension, this readiness to defend yourself. It's gone now." He considered this. "I spent years trying to prove myself to my father, to the board, the financial world, exhausting. Now I'm just trying to prove myself to a 9-year-old girl who sees through pretense instantly. Harder audience, but be more honest." Our hands brushed in the soapy water. Neither of us pulled away. The moment stretched, filled with possibility rather than pressure. When he leaned toward me, it wasn't sudden or desperate. It was a question. I answered by meeting him halfway. The kiss was gentle, respectful, an acknowledgement of history without being trapped by it. It felt like an opening, not a conclusion. "I still love you," he said later, as we sat on the couch with a respectable distance between us. I never stopped, even when I tried to convince myself I had. "Love isn't enough," I replied. "It never was. I know that now." He looked at his hands, those capable hands that had built empires and now helped a 9-year-old with science projects. Love without responsibility is just sentiment. Love without presence is just memory. And now I'm trying to show that I understand the difference. That's why I'm here on Tuesday afternoons when Naomi's frustrated with math problems. That's why I sit through parent-teacher conferences and help with dishes and respect your boundaries. Not because I expect forgiveness, but because this is what love actually means. Showing up, day after boring day, and being present for all of it, not just the highlights. Naomi observed our evolving relationship with scientific detachment mixed with 9-year-old bluntness. "You should create a shared calendar," she announced one morning. "It's inefficient to text about scheduling every time. You're basically co-founders of a startup called My Life, so you need proper project management tools." She enjoyed having 2 adults arguing over who got to attend her science fair presentation, but I caught her watching Cassiel carefully when he thought no one was looking, measuring his consistency, testing his commitment with small challenges. "Dad, can you help with my presentation on Thursday?" she asked, the word "dad" still sounding new on her tongue. "I have a board meeting," he began, then stopped himself. "What time is your presentation?" 2 o'clock. "I'll move the meeting. No hesitation, no qualification." She nodded, satisfied with this response. Another test passed. 6 months after that disciplinary hearing that threatened to expel my 9-year-old, our lives had transformed in ways I couldn't have imagined. Naomi thrived at the Monroe Institute's satellite program, surrounded by peers who thought like her and teachers trained to nurture exceptional minds. The school that had once feared her now used her as an example of their progressive approach to education. And I had learned lessons I never expected. Never accept a system's label of your child when that label comes from fear rather than understanding. Naomi wasn't disruptive or defiant. She was brilliant in an environment unprepared for her kind of mind. What looks like bad behavior in a child can often be unrecognized brilliance trapped in the wrong environment. Naomi's hacking was problem-solving. Her cheating was excellence beyond their metrics. Money and privilege open doors. That's the reality of our world. But character is what keeps you inside when those doors try to close. Cassiel's resources created opportunities, but his consistent presence and respect for boundaries were what truly mattered. Second chances aren't gifts bestowed in a single moment of forgiveness. They're earned through daily actions, through showing up when it's inconvenient, through respecting boundaries even when they frustrate you, through proving with behavior what words alone cannot convey. What began as a near expulsion had become the doorway to a better school, a repaired father-daughter relationship, and a second chance at love that I never thought possible. Tonight, Naomi sits at our kitchen table working on a complex project for the Institute's upcoming showcase. Her fingers fly across the keyboard, pausing occasionally to sketch diagrams or scribble equations. Cassiel and I stand behind her, reviewing her work, debating technical details, united in our pride and support. The algorithm needs refinement, Cassiel suggests gently. The algorithm is fine, I counter. The interface needs work. Naomi ignores us both, following her own vision as she always has. I watch them together, father and daughter, so alike in their intensity and focus, and realize I'm no longer afraid of what comes next. Whatever the future holds, we'll face it as a family built not from obligation or tradition, but from choice, forgiveness, and the daily work of showing up for each other. Some might call it a fairy tale, the billionaire father returning, the gifted child finding her place, the second chance at love. But those people didn't see the hard conversations, the boundaries tested and respected, the consistent effort required to rebuild what was broken. This isn't a fairy tale. It's better. It's real. What would you do in Leighton's shoes? Would you let the billionaire back in or shut him out forever? Comment below with your thoughts on second chances and what it takes to truly earn forgiveness. If you've ever been misunderstood, if you've ever had to fight for your child in a system that didn't see their brilliance, please like and share this story. These experiences are more common than we realize, and sharing them helps others feel less alone. And please subscribe to Mr. Steele Rich Stories so these lessons and stories can reach more people. Your engagement, your likes, comments and shares is what has helped us grow beyond 2,500 subscribers and allows us to keep bringing you powerful stories that matter. Because in the end, whether we're talking about billionaires or everyday heroes, the most valuable currency isn't money. It's showing up day after day for the people who matter most.